The payload, the payload, the payload, the payload and my payload has converged with that payload, the payload.
The payload, the payload, the payload.
The payload, the payload, the payload, the payload, the payload. You know what they say. The payload, the payload.
The payload. This is the payload. 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 The payload.
The payload. The payload moon payloads moon payload. The payload sitting there.
Payload. The payload. The payload. The payload. We cannot stop the payload. The payload. The payload.
Payload. The payload. Payload. The payload.
The payload. The payload. The payload. The payload. Payload. Hey, the payload. Payload's the payload.
The payload. 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 Payload.
Oh! Special delivery on the way. The payload. The payload. Payload. This payload. The payload. The payload's ticking. No, the payload stopped.
Payload. Payload. Boo! The payload. The payload. Payload. This payload. The payload. Payload. The payload.
The payload. Focus on payload. That payload.
This payload, the payload. Payload, payload, this payload. The payload, that payload. Anyone else want to do their jobs today? Move the payload!